Colorado State kicked the field goal to win it. Really low scoring game. Utah State had a couple mistakes, a couple injuries, quarterbacks that went out, or I guess Garrettson was the one that got injured and went out. But um, so yeah, that was definitely a crazy game when they probably 2 years ago probably should have brought in Kent Myers. He was a true freshman, I guess, and then but they didn't for that game and kind of just stalled completely on offense. So that was kind of a crazy game. Obviously, a disappointing game for the Aggies, and Colorado State came up with a win. I mean, it seemed like a pretty big win. So, what do you think? Looking at this game, what do you think the biggest matchup will be in the game? Like, if Colorado State does this, they'll be able to beat the Aggies. What are you looking at?
Well, I kind of look at several matchups. I'm not sure I can really key on one particular
Mm,
thing because, like I said, CSU's kind of been all over the place. Again, I mean, to be completely blunt, last week it was a disaster. Just getting manhandled by a Wyoming team that just is in rebuilding mode, and CSU was at home. If I could, I guess, narrow it down to one thing, I'd say CSU's on the whole had issues with dual threat quarterbacks, specifically, limiting them in the run game. And so with CSU's inability to simply tackle guys, uh, they're decent at swarming to the football, but they just can't bring guys down in phases. And the other aspect too I should probably bring up is a lot of their assignment football has not been as clean as it needs to be. So that just leads me to believe, guys on the edge have to hold their containment. Can't let Myers get outside the pocket. But that being said, lots of dual threat guys have had success moving up in the pocket and running, right up the gut, and I could see Myers doing that. So really, CSU's got to figure out whether they want Kevin Davis, their true stud and on defense at middle, to be a QB spy for the most of the game, or figure out some scheme to kind of limit him and really just stop the whole Utah State rushing attack. Um, I think that's going to be a key. They're going to get their yards. They're going to score some points for sure, but really just limit as much as they can Kent Myers and try to rattle him some.
Yeah. What about the Colorado State offense? Has there kind of been a guy to emerge yet, as far as maybe a go-to wide receiver or running back? Have they? It seems like they've kind of gone by committee. It seems like right now, running the ball and catching the ball.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Again, there's a fair amount of talent, especially in the backfield, but on any given game, it's either a committee approach, some guy, gets hampered by an injury or just doesn't produce, and that all starts up front. Like I said, CSU's offensive line was deemed to be arguably the best in the conference by a lot of pundits entering the season. Lots of experience, lots of supposed talent, guys on preseason award watch lists, and really they have not produced. They have not gotten the pushes they need in the running game. Pass protection, they've found a little bit of success. Um, but it starts up front. They really haven't handled anyone. And so because of that, the running game, which, you have quite a few talented backs, a few guys that have experience, Dalen Dawkins and Izzy Matthews. Matthews is more of a bruiser. Dawkins is more of the jitterbug type guy. Neither has really found too much success this year. And then a true freshman, in my opinion, who sky's the limit, is Marvin Kinsey. He's shown some flashes, but he just hasn't gotten as many touches and reps for whatever reason, probably just because he's a true freshman. So really, you're going to see those three guys. All three could have an even amount of carries. And then as far as receiver, I think you posed this question earlier. Has CSU found a replacement for Rashard Higgins, who's now with the Browns? To answer that question, absolutely not. There's a JUCO guy they brought in. His name's Michael Gallup. He leads the team in receiving, but even then he's dropped the ball. a fair amount. They try to get him involved, in reverses. I think that's one thing that Utah State fans will probably notice is a little more variety in CSU's play calling as far as horizontal play calls, jet sweeps, end arounds, quick screens, trying to get guys like Gallup and some other smaller guys involved to pick up small chunks of yards, things of that nature, because they can't dominate up front. But really there's, I could start naming all the receivers, but really there haven't been many that have produced consistently. I'll say that. They've dropped some passes for sure. Last week was an issue. And tight ends, there's three guys there. And in my opinion, the top pass catcher has hardly even been used in the offense. So really just a lot of weird stuff. And again, the irony of it all is the true freshman quarterback that is really the glue to the team. He's been the most consistent performer since he's been starting.
Yeah, and looking down the roster, it's interesting. Obviously, we cover recruiting a lot, but that Marvin Kinsey, who's been getting quite a bit of playing time, he's a guy that Utah State offered kind of late. Tried to jump in on it. If I remember right, he was committed to like
Yep.
Georgia Southern or somewhere, right? Or Georgia State, and then
Yeah,
flipped to Colorado State.
That's correct.
And then
yeah, and I remember even.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say even the other guy, the other true freshman, some of their other freshmen, was kind of came down to a battle with Utah State. Their other running back, Bodie or Body, however you say his name. He's a guy that Utah State was after as well at one point. So kind of interesting that the Aggies kind of missed out on a couple running backs and they ended up at Colorado State. So left him scrambling. I think they ended up with a pretty good player and he'll have some time to develop. But um, you you were about to say something about Kinsey or?
Yeah, no, I was going to add on. He did take an official visit to Utah State, so they were definitely
Yeah.
one of his 3 or so finalists.
Yep, it seems like Colorado State and Utah State they've been battling with some of these guys. What do you think in general? And this might be the last question, unless Seth can ask one anytime too. But what do you think about the kind of you mentioned the recruiting ties down south and that kind of thing. Do you feel like that's just going to be kind of a uh, part of their strategy, or are they trying to go all in with that, or um, is that something that they can just maybe add a few athletes onto their Colorado in-state guys, that kind of thing? What do you think about
Right.
that theory, I guess?
Yeah. So it's interesting. A lot of the members on CSU staff do have Southeast ties. I mean,
Hmm.
you have Coach Bobo, who's the offensive coordinator at Georgia, Will Friend, who's the offensive line coach at Georgia, Joe Cox, obviously played quarterback at Georgia, um, Brian Applewhite, who coached down in Louisiana, Alvis Whitted, born in North Carolina. So all these guys really, I would say a large majority of the staffers either coached, played, or grew up in the Southeast, or all of the above. So we saw in last year's class for sure, they signed, I believe, 26 guys. A large chunk were from Georgia, Florida, Colin Hill, the quarterback from South Carolina. They got a guy from North Carolina, a guy or two from Louisiana. So, yeah, there's going to be a large chunk of guys from the Southeast. There's no question about that. And it's interesting because, Steve Fairchild 2 regimes ago recruited a lot of kids from Florida, and that turned out to be a disaster because a lot of those kids got homesick or didn't qualify, and that's what led to so many. CSU was irrelevant. They had 3 straight 3-9 seasons, and that was part of it. So will it work this time around? Obviously, it's yet to be determined. So far, kids are staying here and producing. Kinsey's from Atlanta, Hill's from South Carolina. Those guys are already producing. So it's definitely going to be a continuing trend. And, CSU's traditional recruiting ties have been Texas and California, and of course Colorado. They're still sticking there a little bit, but not as much talent in Colorado, of course. And at this point, which is to me, I have not seen at all since I've been covering CSU recruiting for 6 years, and really following it for a lot longer than that. CSU is actually recruiting nationally, which is pretty interesting for a pretty, relative small school that most kids haven't heard about. CSU is getting commitments from Pennsylvania, Illinois, Washington, literally all over the continental United States. I know Utah State does a fair amount of recruiting all over the country, especially, Florida, Texas, Cali, some in the Northeast. I talk to kids quite often that are talking to Utah State. So certainly, like as you mentioned earlier, Isaac, there's a lot of recruiting battles between these two schools. And it's weird that CSU is going nationally because so many kids I talk to, haven't even heard of CSU until they start to get recruited by the Rams. So it's interesting. Will it pan out? We'll see. I think they need to stick to Texas and Cali, some in the Southeast, which is kind of a blueprint that Utah State has done. And I think something that CSU is kind of trying to emulate, especially, is going after some junior college kids and trying to go for some of the poly kids and get that connection going, which, Utah State's had a ton of success at. And I think Bobo's seen that's worked in the Mountain West, so he's trying to kind of emulate that a little bit.
Yeah, it seems like to me. I mean, I'm no expert. I'm not a coach, obviously, but it seems like if they focused on a few areas, that would make more sense than to try to recruit Pennsylvania and Washington and Illinois and every state in the union. But but obviously players win games. If you can get the best players, then you're probably going to have some success. So it'll uh, it'll be interesting to see how they build that program up. It seems like they have good coaches. Um, it doesn't seem like there's any big weaknesses on the team. Hopefully, it seemed like this year maybe they can get things going a little bit more. I obviously Aggie fans are hoping that that's not this Saturday, and really it could be a really interesting game as far as which team gets it going and which team gets momentum, which team takes advantage of maybe some opportunities. Because so far this year, I mean, different schedules and different things. They've definitely had different roads to get here, but you never know. You never know what could happen, especially with Colorado State at home on homecoming and everything. So my last question, we like to get a little bit outside of the box. Give us an idea of like something, a restaurant that if somebody's coming to the game in Fort Collins, give us an idea of a restaurant on Saturday for lunch or for dinner or something where they should go and definitely check out while they're in Fort Collins.
Sure. Well, certainly I'm probably going to come across as being pretty biased. I've lived in Fort Collins for about 10 years now,
Yeah.
but really it's a great blend of, kind of a lot of cultures, I guess. It's certainly a college town through and through. Yet it's kind of like, I guess, new age with some tradition. And of course, a lot of people consider Fort Collins one of the, better places for microbreweries, and that's certainly the case with like New Belgium and Odell. So for Aggies fans traveling through, I certainly suggest checking out some of the breweries here. There's just so many. I just mentioned those two, and there's a boatload of others. I'd say just look it up, but definitely check out some breweries. There's lots of great eateries. Um, I think the stat a couple years ago, I think this still holds true, but CSU has the most pizza places per capita in the United States. So if you like your pizza, it's a good place to be. And really, if you just hit up Old Town Fort Collins, which is the downtown, a lot of different, things to check out there. There's Horsetooth Reservoir, which is beautiful, right next to the Hughes Stadium. Some great views there. So really, there's a lot to do there. A lot of great places. It's hard not to really enjoy yourself if you hit up Old Town. But in my opinion, of course, I'm probably biased, like I said, but a lot of great places to hit up and to enjoy.
Yeah, it's definitely a nice